We all have blind spots. We think we're on a roll, and the audience is like, oh, no, he doesn't really know that much about us.
We're talking about dressing appropriately.
Once you know better, do better. As a result, lead better.
You can no longer efficiently manage something greater than the sharing of a pizza as a team. Typically, that breakdown begins at around the 10th teammate.
Everything from being well-groomed, well-dressed, giving eye-to-eye contact, speaking with clarity and confidence.
Where have you had to have a course correct with one of your customers? Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest here. Kevin, do you mind describing for the audience who you are, what you do, and how you serve the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Jamie, for this wonderful opportunity. I'm a native of Richmond, Virginia, the son of a U.S. Marine. So I learned very, very early about discipline and obedience and focused and staying close attention to detail in everything that we do. I went on to graduate from Virginia Commonwealth University, right there in Richmond as well, School of Business. And after graduation, I relocated from my hometown of Richmond to the Washington, D.C., Maryland metropolitan area to begin what became a 34-year career with the federal government. Upon retirement, I recognized that after my last position as chief of staff, that I wanted to make a difference and do something in terms of helping leaders understand how important their role is. And it's not just what we know, but it's also how we lead people, how we share information, provide resources, develop, pour into, care for, and even empathize and show some compassion along the journey. So that's the place and space that I'm in right now. All things leadership, just pouring into these founders of these companies, helping people across the globe understand the importance of being a good leader, because when we do, we're on our way now to helping to make the world a much better place.
Fantastic. So today's topic, we're going to be talking in and around showing up as a leader and how you show up. There's many times how you're perceived as a leader. I'll tell you a quick story. My first agency was a global sales training company. And we quickly, we'll call jump the shark. Like we went from local Toronto-based small to medium businesses to Microsoft, Oracle, Intel, Thomson Reuters as customers very quickly. Yet I hadn't kind of kept up with that change of the type of customer we were serving. So this is 1 or 2 years in, we're enabling a $500 million software company and hundreds of sellers on the call. I'm in a Led Zeppelin t-shirt sharing my wisdom on social selling and LinkedIn prospecting best practices. After the call, the chief revenue officer calls me and he says, listen, that was fantastic. Great insights. Here's the problem. The problem is we're a publicly traded business. All my teammates are in shirts and ties. And so they feel like they're being enabled by a kid. So can you dress appropriately? And this is ironic. I'm actually at a ski lodge right now. My son is in training for competitive racing right now. So it's very ironic. We're talking about dressing appropriately. But Kevin, with that, what is a prime example of, and especially from your military background, where you've demonstrated leadership qualities without even opening up your mouth?
Well, a lot of it has to do with how people perceive us, because you've heard this before, but when you hear it in the context of leadership, a person's perception is their reality. And so when we show up, everything from being well-groomed, well-dressed, giving eye-to-eye contact, speaking with clarity and confidence, how we carry ourselves, how we present, how we write, how we lead people, how we treat people, how we interact with diverse groups of people. All of that really matters. And we're telling a story. Oftentimes we don't have to say a word. It's just nonverbal communication that goes a long way. And people develop a perception based upon what they see and it becomes their reality. And that's why you got the feedback that you did. As knowledgeable as you are, as much acumen as you bring to the game, and as well versed as you are in your particular field, how you showed up mattered, not just to that audience, but to all audiences. So it has a lot to do with how people perceive us, and then how they perceive us, quite frankly, helps them to make a decision whether they want to go or no go. And so it matters.
So let's translate this to the founder. The founder starts a business. A founder starts to scale beyond their initial sphere of influence of a ragtag team of misfits around them. And now the company's starting to become professionalized. And that typically happens when you cross past what Steve Jobs used to call the pizza party. Essentially, you can no longer efficiently manage something greater than the sharing of a pizza as a team. So now that breakdown begins at around the 10th teammate, and then it begins again around the 30th teammate. What advice would you give? You're with a budding entrepreneur right now, and you're helping them understand that you're now going to be leading in a very different way. What are some great pieces of advice that you would give that would change to your own definition? You would change the perception of their team by the way that person shows up.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it, Jamie, has to do with the fact that we have to know your audience. You can also say, in the vernacular, know your customer. And what I mean by that is recognizing and acknowledging that while we are dealing with people who have a mission and vision to move forward and advance as it relates to their company, their government agency, their nonprofit, or their academic institution, industries are different. How the finance industry moves is different than the automotive industry, is different than the agricultural industry, different than the technology industry. I could go on and on and on. Yeah, we are dealing with people, but you have to know your audience and you have to know your customer, because the folks in the finance world think, operate, and execute a little bit differently than those in the technology sphere. And so as you were asking your question, that's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of advice and counsel and guidance. Know your customer. I get questions all the time. For example, I work with a number of healthcare organizations. And in the healthcare field, before I can get hired, they always ask consistently, what other healthcare organizations have you worked with? Because it matters to them. In the finance world, not so much so. Technology world, not so much so. But if you know your audience, you're going to be that much further ahead.
Where have you had to have a course correct with one of your customers? Can you give a prime example of not showing up? They have conflicting body language. They are saying things and then doing something different. Or what are some telltale signs for the audience who's listening to help them understand that perhaps in their mind, they're being a great leader, but here are the 3 or 4 or 5 things you're doing that your employees, your customers, your vendors are shaking their head and going, "Oh, this is terrible."
Great question, Jamie. That lends itself to the point that we all have blind spots. You and I never see ourselves the way that others see us. That's why we need mentors. That's why we need coaches. That's why we need great teammates who aren't afraid to give us feedback and input so we can fill in the gap. Listen, I do a great deal of leadership development training, a lot of executive coaching. I pour into leaders across the marketplace, government, corporations, churches, nonprofits, and academic institutions. I've gone into some places and spaces before, and I did not do my due diligence. I did not do my homework. And I'm just rocking and rolling, and I'm thinking I'm doing a great job. And the audience can tell that I don't know what I should know about their particular organization. we should be speaking their language. We should be talking to them. We should be addressing their issues and their concerns, not so much at a 15,000 foot level, but to be able to bring it all the way down to maybe 250 feet so they can really, really, really make it relatable and applicable as we go forward. And so that's something that I want all of us to remember and take the time to do around the homework and getting to know, like I said a little bit earlier, getting to know your audience, getting to know your client, getting to know your customer. Because again, we all have blind spots. We think we're on a roll, and the audience is like, oh, no, he doesn't really know that much about us. He's giving us generic strategies and principles, but we need some specific strategies and principles around real issues that we're dealing with. So that's a lessons learned. And I've had to make a course correction based on feedback there.
Fantastic. How do people get a hold of you if they want to know more about your business? What's an ideal customer for you?
Okay. All right. Well, if you can see my logo on my shirt, the company is the Johnson Leadership Group. We're 7 years now and going strong, looking to do some more great things. Our website is www.thejohnsonleadershipgroup, and the email is kevin@thejohnsonleadershipgroup. We're always looking to reach out into the marketplace and to be available to serve and support and advocate for the number of companies that have aspiring leaders, frontline leaders, mid-level leaders, and senior level leaders. Those are the 4 different categories that we really pour into. We have master classes. Of course, we do training remotely. We do training in a hybrid situation, but my preference is always in person. It's just nothing like being there with people, but I realize where we are and how technology has advanced. And we're just super excited about the next year that's coming up and some really, really critical components that we have in place so we can continue to grow and scale, but equally important to reach more leaders around the globe.
That's fantastic. Any words of wisdom you'll leave for your for any of your 4 archetypes of leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something that I adopted last year, and I run with it quite frequently. Leaders are learners, and so we need to know better. And the way that you know better is just never let your thirst quench and never let your hunger feel in terms of wanting to know more and learn more and just to be better. And doing so, you know better. And then once you know better, then it's important that we do better. That's the call to action based upon what you know, what you've learned, what you've applied. Now let's do it. Let's do better. So know better, do better. And then number 3, as a result, lead better. So acquire the knowledge, right? Now, call to action, do better. Now, lead better. And I'm just a firm believer, Jamie, and it's part of my personal life's mission that better leaders do indeed help to make the world a much better place. And I think all of us would collectively agree we would like to live in a world that's much better.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for being on Outsource to Profits.
Absolutely. Thank you.